In April 2016, an author would vanish from her home without a trace, and this would spark a sequence of events that would bring down almost a decade's worth of lies and deceit. Helen Bailey was a well-respected author, family member and friend. Her work for brands like Nintendo, Nickelodeon and Rugrats are just some of the achievements that she could add to a hugely successful career. But behind the achievements in her personal life was a pain, a loss and a void that was left behind. A void that one person was able to fill. But what happens when that person is not the person that they had you believe they were? This is a story of greed, deception and betrayal, a case in which an evil perpetrator would use another person's heartbreak to manipulate them. A case with evidence left behind, suspicious behaviour from those involved, a web of lies uncovered that had torn a family apart, and a police investigation which led all the way back to the spot in which it started. This is the murder of Helen Bailey.
Before we actually crack on with telling you guys the story, I just want to ask you, did you actually know who Helen was before you heard about this case?
No, I didn't. I had no idea who Helen Bailey was, but obviously once I started to hear about the case, when it hit the headlines, it was on the news, I think myself, with a lot of other people inside the UK, came to understand that actually Helen Bailey's work, the books that she had written, were often on the national curriculum inside the UK. So it was something that a lot of people will have had somewhat of a connection
to, without necessarily even remembering it. Because I have to say, if you can go all the way back and remember the authors of which you read at school, like, fair play to you, because I can't remember. Like Biff and Chip, loved Biff and Chip. Great. Can't remember who wrote them.
Great characters. As far as I know, haven't been involved in any true crime cases.
Well, do you know what? You'd be surprised.
Yeah, you probably would.
You probably would be surprised. Right, can I tell you a little bit more then about who Helen actually was?
I would love to hear a bit more about Helen Bailey herself.
Right, so Helen was born on the 22nd of August 1964 in Northumberland. Don't know if you know this, but she actually really struggled at school. She always saw herself as a bit of an outsider, a bit of a loner at school, and she struggled to sort of make friends. So much so that she actually started to write a bit of a diary. And she did that to sort of set her thoughts down on paper and find some solace in her, you know, her own thinking and getting through what she found to be quite difficult circumstances at school. But leaving school, she actually went on and attended university. She actually wanted to be in the science field originally, and she actually had a passion, much like a lot of you, in true crime. She actually wanted to be sort of like a forensic pathologist. She was going into that sort of, she was doing a course to then eventually get into pathology and that sort of thing, right? Around true crime cases and, you know, around actual crimes, right? So she was very much looking into that, but she didn't actually make it to the science world. She actually ended up going into marketing and starting her career in that field. In 1987, she actually joined a licensing rights company called Patrick Sinfield, and that was where she met the company's founder, John Sinfield. And basically, they started up a relationship very soon after that, and they ended up getting married in 1996, and they actually moved to the Highgate area of London, which is very much like a very well-to-do area, I'm sure, for very expensive places. This isn't like a cheap part of London. And during their relationship, John saw a real talent in Helen, and he was actually the one that had seen she'd been writing diaries, and John actually helped Helen believe in herself to take the plunge from just writing diaries to actually writing more in-depth fiction. So all in all, Helen actually started becoming an author, and she wrote 22 books in total. And she was so talented that she was nominated for various awards and amassed a huge personal fortune estimated at around £4 million.
Yeah, she obviously had loads of different publications, Helen Bailey, but the main one that a lot of people are now saying that obviously they read at school and stuff like that was a series of books called Electra Brown, and that was the series of books that she was very well known for.
Yeah, and those are the ones you actually read, right?
These are the ones that were on the curriculum inside a lot of high schools inside the UK when I was at school.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it just shows you, Joey's read them in the curriculum, like they were pervasive across all of the UK. It just shows you you how far and wide her writing actually went. So you can imagine that having gone through this career and being very successful to this point, she was very much on cloud nine. She had a very loving and happy marriage, and she was incredibly successful in her own right. So when in 2011, the couple decided to go on a lovely trip to one of my favorite places in the entire world, in Barbados, you might be thinking that they were incredibly happy, and you would be right in thinking that. But unfortunately, what happened on this trip turned into what must have been for Helen a complete nightmare. And that's because John went out swimming, and again, that was against Helen's advice. And the current in Barbados can change massively. There is a side that's on the Atlantic Ocean, and there's a side that's on the Caribbean Sea. If you're on the Atlantic side, it can get very rough, and the sea can be huge waves, to be fair. There are people that go surfing there, and really, they do tell you to be very concerned, actually, with the riptides, because it can pull you out. And this is exactly what actually happened to John. He went for this very innocuous swim. Helen was actually on the beach watching him, and she heard, before she saw him crying out for help and actually asking for her assistance. And by the time she was able to sort of get up and run over to the sea, he had already been pulled out. And it's very unfortunate. He actually passed away on this holiday. He actually drowned by the current. And so Helen then, I mean, how do you even get over that? You know, hugely struck by grief, hugely traumatic moment, seeing her partner, you know, at what she thought was one of the most happy times of her life get ripped away from her.
That's one of the things there, like, it must be the weirdest type of grief. That's one of the things that I struggle to comprehend. I struggle to get my head around so much, because Helen Bailey actually spoke about this herself, and she spoke about it when she was actually speaking about a book that was obviously written off the back of this incident, and it was a book called When Bad Things Happen in Good Bikinis, right? Yeah. And she actually spoke about the fact that a lot of people thought she was joking and like making light of the situation, and she wasn't. She was actually detailing the process that she went through in losing her husband and grieving the loss of her husband, but it had that sort of extra niche almost to it, that this grieving process happened in what was supposed to be a really, really happy memory that they would remember forever. So it was very, very specific, the experience to herself. And that actually meant, in my opinion, that her experience there was obviously something that she was able to help other people with going forward off the back of that.
Yes.
And I think that there'll have been people that were put in that sort of situation and position before that probably would have had no one that they'd be able to relate to, because it is so niche in that way of, you know, going on a holiday and losing a partner. And it was definitely something that Helen Bailey, in my opinion, turned into a massive positive and was able to inspire and help other people with.
100%, right? And you can imagine traveling home on that plane, how awful you would feel. She was with him for several years. You can imagine the sort of the feeling of just immense loss and loneliness and grief and everything around that. I know so many people watching will have had similar experiences in their life and feel very passionately about this moment. And, you know, Helen was very similar to this. And as you say, she started writing some of her thoughts and feelings down, I'm sure in her diaries originally, as a private thing for herself and for her own mental health. But also she then created her own blog as well. And this blog turned into a Facebook page as well. And it was actually called Planet Grief. And what she decided to do was sort of share her own experiences with the help of building a community to help others and allow them to share their own experiences, have an interchange of conversation, and also not feel, in moments where you feel the loneliest, that you are actually alone. You've got that camaraderie, you've got people helping you. And this movement really started. It was a big thing, this Facebook group and this blog. It actually really blossomed into something quite massive.
Yeah, it was a space, I think, a safe space, you could probably describe it as, where, you know, people that were grieving could go there and they could do so in a way that they felt fit. They felt like they were grieving in a environment where they weren't judged.
There's no manual for this, is there? Like, there's never anyone that says to you at school, if you go through a tragic loss of someone that you really care about, this is how you should do it, and these are the steps that you do, and this is the types of grief, and eventually you'll feel better and you'll be able to be back to normal.
Well, there can be no manual,
There
because
can't.
every single person's wired up different. Every single person reacts differently. I know personally, when I've gone through times when I'm grieving, I want to shut myself off, and I don't want people to interact with me. I want to be far away and out away with everyone. And then some people actually find their strength in numbers. Some people find that by sharing the experience with other people that have been through similar to themselves, it helps them gain the strength that they need to be able to move forward with their life. So I think that everyone in this group was obviously there for the right reasons. They were benefiting massively from it. And obviously, look, if I was someone that was in that group, I personally think I would have looked up to Helen a little bit for being the trailblazer almost.
Yeah, 100%. And much like we've said in terms of the blog finding other people and finding communities, Helen herself would find community and friendship and potentially even love on her own blog.
Maybe you could even suggest that someone could find Helen rather than Helen finding it.
Exactly that. And that person that Joey mentions there was called Ian Stewart.
So Ian Stewart was actually also a member of the Facebook group, and he was in there because he was grieving the loss of his wife Diane Stewart, who had passed away in 2010. This was somewhat of an unexplained death in a way, but it was put down to her epilepsy, and we will go back to that in a bit. But let's take it back to the start with Ian. He was born in 1960 and described his early life as complicated. His mother had postnatal depression as well as severe OCD, and that made Ian feel like he couldn't really bring friends home or have a normal home life. But he didn't let it end up stopping him academically. He did well at school. He ended up going to Salford University, where he studied computer science. And it was actually at Salford University where he suffered a cut to his face. If you've seen the pictures of him, you'll see that he's got quite a prominent scar across his face, and this was something that he actually did when he was doing some sports at university. He slipped through some dodgy glass or something like that, and basically he was rewarded a £7,000 payout, which back in those days would have been a lot of money, and it would suggest that the university took responsibility for this situation. And it would be at this university where Ian would meet his first wife, Diane. She was a modern languages student, and the pair hit it off. They got on so well that by the year 1986, they had married. And they had two sons, Jamie and Oliver, and by 2010, the pair had been together for the best part of 30 years, with children who now themselves were setting out into the world, with Oliver being 15 and Jamie being 18. But on the 25th of June 2010, disaster would strike the Stewart household.
Right, okay, tell me exactly what's happened.
My wife's had a fit, and I think she's in the garden.
Is she breathing?
I don't think so. I've turned her to try and put her in recovery position, but I can't do it. She's just flopped back.
Right, pump the chest hard and fast, at least twice per second.
Right,
We're
yeah.
going to do this 600 times or until help can take over.
Okay, doing it.
You need to count out loud, sir, so that I can hear
sorry.
you.
1, 2, 1, 2.
So I'd love to know your opinion on this, mate, but he doesn't seem like a normal person having a 999 call of a loved one that he'd been with for nearly 30 years.
It's a little bit nonchalant for a loved one dying.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Little bit.
I would say
slightly strange, I would say.
There's a few things, to be honest, in there.
Yep.
Didn't really sound as panicked as you would be expecting to hear. Now, obviously, we've already spoke about the fact that everyone grieves in different ways. Everyone panics in different ways. But you would expect probably a more heightened tone from maybe Ian on the phone there. And the main thing that I would say is the fact that when the paramedics are telling him to administer CPR upon his wife, he's not really all that forthcoming. And to the extent, mate, that did you know when the paramedics actually get there, right, 17 minutes after the phone call was placed, Diane's pronounced dead at the scene. And there's no actual visible evidence that anyone even attempted to administer CPR on her.
No, and when you, like, basically in this call, they were giving him advice on exactly what to do. And if you were administering CPR for that level of time, 17 minutes, as Joey says, there would be physical marks. Like, it's quite an aggressive process, CPR. If you've ever had to do it with any first aid training, they tell you how to do it. And it's definitely not, tapping someone on the chest. It's quite significant manual movement to get someone's heart trying to beat again.
Yeah, I mean, to put it into perspective, If you ever have an elderly relative go into hospital, you'll be asked to sign, or there's a likely chance you might be asked in certain scenarios to sign a do not resuscitate disclosure, right? Now, the reason for that is because actually administering CPR to an elderly person or anything like that comes with a lot of
risks,
distinct risks, you know, breaking of ribs, bones, things like that. And
even
that's
more
why
internal bleeding, like loads of other stuff can happen.
There's so much more that could happen. And that's why they say in cases, let's say for someone who is on their last legs and, you know, is terminally ill, isn't going to make it, they would often suggest that to avoid what can actually be a real sort of horrific incident, to avoid that, they often suggest you to sign a do not resuscitate. So the thing I'm trying to get across here is if CPR had been administered that day, they'd be able to tell, in my opinion.
100%. And it wasn't just that, right? There were other warning signs that I thought were really strange in the call. He says that basically he had tried to put her in the recovery position. Anyone that's ever put anyone in the recovery position knows that you do it or you don't do it. It's one of those things where even if someone is in a fit, even if someone is going through an incredible amount of pain, if you put them in the recovery position and you watch over them, you can maintain that position quite easily. So again, it's even like things like, and again, this is meant to be his partner. He isn't even doing like the basic first aid things that he's meant to be doing in this scenario, is he?
No, not at all, in my opinion. I think that I was probably more animated for my partner giving birth than he was for his wife, who is tragically dying in the back garden. And obviously, I say about how tragic it was tragic. It was devastating for the family. But for Ian, the death did have some benefits.
When you say benefits, what do you actually mean here?
Well, at the time of her death, not only did Diane earn more money than Ian, she had more money than Ian. And that meant that after her death, there was a £28,000 life insurance payout that was received by obviously Ian. The balance in her bank account was also distributed to Ian. That was about £70,000 as well. And the property that she owned ended up selling for about £500,000, which obviously Ian benefited from. But before he sold that house, he would meet Helen Bailey. And as Josh has already told us, this would be via a Facebook group. So Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how things blossomed between Ian and Helen?
Yeah, so after they were chatting online, right, they obviously built this sort of bond that you can only really get sometimes in these traumatic situations, can't you? You can understand how people fall in love like this. In fact, this is a story as old as time, really. I know plenty of people that have met in this way and bonded over something and formed very long-lasting relationships.
Trauma bonding is a lot more relevant and it happens a lot more than people would realise, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. And this relationship, it sort of went from strength to strength very, very quickly. You can imagine these guys are a certain age now. It's not like they're in their 20s. And when you get to that kind of age, you know really what you want, don't you? And so by this point, they started talking. And I think within a month, they were already in, you know, meeting up, you know, territory. And the relationship sort of blossomed from there. And so much so, Helen actually had a nickname for Ian. And her nickname was the gorgeous grey-haired widower. Yeah, she actually...
Which is how you described him earlier, to be fair.
To be fair, mate, I think Helen was being a bit kind to him.
To be honest, I think Helen's describing herself.
I don't think I would...
I don't think... She's the one that would be a better description
100%
than Ian.
We'll flash a picture of Ian on screen now. I don't want to be too harsh on him, but I wouldn't call him gorgeous.
I will be harsh on him. I think he looks like he's just been dragged through a dump at all times. Not a clean one either.
Joey said it, not me. So in 2013, the couple actually purchased a huge home. It was a gated property. It was valued at £1.5 million in a place called Royston in Hertfordshire, which I had to look up. It was on the other side of Hertfordshire from where I grew up. So not too far away from me, in the same neck of the woods. I can tell you it's a very nice place. And Helen was obviously the one that was contributing the most cash to buy this house. And something quite strange happened when they first moved in. Helen had obviously invited her brother to have a look around the house and show it off. And I can understand with a £1.5 million house, you might want to show it off.
I'd invite anyone over.
Honestly,
neighbours,
anyone that wanted to come
run,
yeah,
anything.
The house party for Joey Knight's welcoming to a £1.5 million house, you would all be invited to. Mm-hmm. That's how serious it would be. And so Helen's brother is looking around and they're going from room to room and they end up in the garage. And Helen is there, her brother is there, and Ian's there. They're all there sort of doing the tour all together. And Helen makes a remark. She says, we've got this garage. Underneath this garage is a really big and new cesspit that we're incredibly happy to get because, you know, it just works out. And she says, this would be a really good place to hide a body. And just remember that point.
And
right?
Ian would have been there at that time.
Ian was there. He heard the whole thing.
Potentially a little bit of foreshadowing.
Yes, exactly. And so the next time we check in on the couple, it was 2014 in July. Helen started working on her will, and she actually changed her will. Previously, her estate would go to her brother, who we've just talked about, and her friend and some of her extended family. But she changed this will and made Ian the primary beneficiary of her estate. She did this reportedly because she was worried about Ian's sort of financial status if she ended up passing away. Bear in mind, I don't think Ian was actually working at this point. Ian was unwell. He had a medical condition. So apparently he wasn't providing for the family. It was very much Helen's money. And so she was pretty worried for him. And again, this is just a huge testament to the type of woman that Helen was. She was incredibly generous and she really looked after everyone that was around her. So I just want to say at this point, Helen, you are an absolute trooper. And I actually do also want to say, probably shouldn't change your will at this point to giving Ian.
Well, the funny thing is, you actually mentioned the fact of looking after everyone around her. And one thing that you didn't mention there is the fact that Helen wasn't just looking after Ian most of the time, by the way. Helen wasn't just putting plans in place for what would happen to Ian in the circumstance of her death or something like that, making sure he was looked after. Helen was looking after Ian's two sons as well. Remember, we're speaking about these boys who were, 15 and 18, around that age. They were still present in their life, and Helen, you know, had a lot of admiration for them as well.
She also did, and she so much so she actually named them in the will as well.
I know.
So there you go, absolutely crazy. And it wasn't just that; she was also looking at her financial affairs in more order than that. She actually took out a life insurance policy, and this had up to £1.3 million of potential cover.
Where have I heard a life insurance policy before? Someone else took out a life insurance policy.
Go on.
Was it? It wouldn't have been Diane, Ian's first wife. Did she have a life insurance
Oh
policy?
yeah, just don't worry about that though. I'm sure that wasn't relevant at all, and I'm sure he was incredibly upset that his wife had passed away, and he didn't even care about the money. Yeah, coincidence. Absolute coincidence. And so, you know, we're just putting a pin on that and just saying that there were some financial elements that had recently changed, you know, near in the time that we're talking about here. So let's fast forward to 2015. Helen actually published the book that Joey mentioned earlier on, When Bad Things Happen in Good Bikinis. And she actually dedicated this book to Ian. She said that you are my happy ending. And in 2016, the couple were engaged and they planned to marry in the September of that year. But because Ian was so unwell, the plans kept getting pushed back. And in the same year, Helen started to feel more and more unwell. So much so that she had actually emailed friends saying that she was incredibly sleepy. She'd had some memory loss of short-term memory. She was finding it very difficult to write. All things that in her right mind she wouldn't have experienced. And so these were very strange symptoms for her. And again, she even went one more than asking her friends for some support. She actually even Googled some of the symptoms and tried to find out what could potentially be causing them. And again, it was just sort of super unusual at the time. But then the police get a phone call, not to 999, but to a non-urgent phone number. And this was the call.
Hello there. My partner has been missing since Monday.
What's your partner's name?
Helen Bailey.
And what's her date of birth?
Oh, crikey. God, she phoned me there. 22nd. Right, just let me double check. 1 second. Oh, God. 22nd of August, 1964. No, she left a note. She said in the note something like, I need space and time alone. I'm going to Broadstairs. Please don't contact me in any way.
What's her height?
Oh, I'm going to guess here. She has told me, but she's probably 5'10", just something like that.
And her eye colour?
Oh my God, how do you forget these things? I don't know at the moment. Sorry, it's just gone out of my head.
Blank, that's no problem.
Sorry, God, that's terrible.
That's no problem. And her sort of skin colour?
Pale, I guess I would say. Pale.
I mean, let's be honest, that was clearly a strange phone call. I think that most people straight off the bat would be able to tell you that it is weird that he didn't know what colour eyes his partner had. It probably is quite weird that he doesn't know how tall she is, and also quite weird that he doesn't know her date of birth. All of that being said, doesn't necessarily mean he's done anything wrong, does it?
No, it doesn't. But then also, what about the fact that it was 4 days after she originally went missing that he had the phone call in the first place to a non-urgent phone, police phone number? Bit strange.
Bit strange. Can I tell you another thing that's strange?
Yep.
Say I go in tonight, right? I go into the flat. My missus ain't there. There's a note on the side that she's left me, right? She don't leave me many notes, my missus. She'd send me a text. I'd probably find it weird. But if there was a note left on the side, for whatever reason, even if I thought that she was going to be out for 5-10 minutes, I just don't think it would come into my head to throw that note away.
Bit strange to not keep that. Especially when the note said, I'm going away, I need space. Please don't contact me.
Yeah, and obviously, look, we did see Ian interviewed inside his home address, inside the address where it said that Helen disappeared from. It wasn't spotless, mate. It wasn't the sort of house where something needs to be put in the bin and driven to the dump straight away. There was a little bit of clutter there. It didn't really look in line with his story that... Obviously, once I've read that on the piece of paper, it's trash. I threw it away straight away. That's what he said he did. A bit weird, in my opinion.
And I think it keeps getting weirder from even that point, though, mate, because obviously the police then get involved straight away after that phone call, and they speak to him, and he was very reticent to speak to the police. And actually, even when they did speak to him, he wasn't giving very much away, was he?
Yeah, for me, Ian came across demotivated, definitely a little bit too casual, but at the same time as that, you have to remember that he might have sort of borderline erratic behaviour, but who's going to behave completely normally in this sort of scenario? And then I think you have to look at the history of the man, and you look at the fact that he didn't have a criminal record. There wasn't any reports of unsettlement between himself and Helen. Helen, obviously, as you've stated there, had it on record in the public domain that Ian was someone that she loved. So there wasn't really anything straight away to make us suspicious of Ian. Probably more so, we just doubted the way he went about things in the aftermath. And ultimately, I think many people would have seen his demeanour as a lack of strength during adversity. Some may argue that life had already beaten the strength out of him after losing his first wife. And I think this is where we really need to have a conversation about how little or how much people should actually grieve and how we perceive that from the outside looking in, because there was a lot of people that felt like Ian wasn't grieving enough. There were a lot of people that felt like maybe Ian wasn't concerned enough. And there were even some people that had been around Ian a few years prior when his first wife had passed away. And they were making comparisons that were a little bit worrying here. A few observers said that when Ian lost his first wife, Diane, he seemed very despondent, with some even describing Ian as totally unbothered. And some of his actions in the aftermath could be described as someone who's trying to heal the grief that they're feeling and the pain that they're experiencing. But some people would describe it as opportunistic. He went out and bought himself a brand new sports car in the wake of his wife's death. There was obviously a bit of debate over whether or not he administered CPR. And another thing, he did move on very, very quickly and start romantic relationships again after that death. By the way, all of these things are fine, but if you add up all of this erratic behaviour around the time that a monumental circumstance seems to happen in another wife of Ian's either dying or disappearing or coming to some sort of harm, you have to ask the question. And that question has to be, does Ian have any involvement in this? Because there were so many things in the wake of Helen's death that just didn't add up. Starting off with the fact, like we said, that Ian said he had thrown away the note that Helen left him. Not only that, he had gone to a solicitor's in the wake of her disappearance, and he was trying to act as power of attorney and push through the sale of one of Helen's properties after her disappearance. Josh, you and your partner have just bought a property. If she had gone missing in the process of you buying that property, do you think you'd have put it on the back burner maybe?
I probably wouldn't have tried to buy a property and sell my property. I'd probably think of other things at the time that were more important than
Can
that.
I ask you a question then, while we're going along this sort of line of thought? If your partner, obviously God forbid, touch wood, if anything did happen and she disappeared one day, let's say for example you two had a bit of a romantic getaway booked before, would you cancel it?
I probably wouldn't continue to go on a luxury holiday if my partner went missing, Joey. No, I think it'd be a bit weird if I did.
Yeah, I think most people would find that a little bit weird.
Yeah. Wait, you're saying he did that?
2 weeks after Helen goes missing, Ian flies out to Spain for a holiday that they had booked. And despite the fact that I've said time in, time out that everyone grieves in different ways, the police weren't having it. They knew that this was weird. This was suspicious at best. And therefore, they started to take a deeper look into Ian's movements and exactly what he had been doing in the time that Helen had disappeared. And as well as trying to push through a sale on one of her properties, there was also a standing order that had been altered from Helen's account to Ian's account. And this standing order had gone from monthly payments of around £400 to over 10 times that. And officers noted that when attending the household, Ian made them feel very, very uncomfortable. They said that he would follow them around, he would constantly ask them what they were doing. It was as if he was underneath their feet, and potentially it could have looked like he was maybe luring them away from certain parts of the house that they had wanted to go into.
He was actually saying, by the way, to the police, he kept going, "Oh, don't worry about the garage. There's nothing to find in there and it's quite messy, so don't even bother going in to search the garage."
I'd probably worry about the garage if you said that.
If you're a police officer and someone is saying when you're searching the house, don't worry about a certain room, like it's fine, you shouldn't check that out, there's probably nothing to look in there, that's the room I'm going to look at straight away.
I would say that would be about right,
Yeah.
But before the police even have a chance to get to the garage, some of the data that they've been looking into yields some results. Because obviously we remember that the note that Helen left behind said, apparently, according to Ian, that she was potentially going to go to one of her holiday homes, didn't she?
She did. And what you would therefore expect is that there might be some data, particularly from the cell phone, to say she's been down that sort of neck of the woods and she might have connected with cell towers, or might even have connected to the Wi-Fi in the house if she might have been there.
And that is exactly what happens. 4 days or so after they found out that she's missing, the police find that Helen Bailey's phone connected to the Wi-Fi at her house in Kent. And therefore, they believed that maybe she had been there. But the problem was, by that point, Helen was known to be missing. The house had been checked, the police had been there, and she was nowhere to be seen. One person who it turned out did go there that day, though, was Ian Stewart. He went to the house and he said to the police that it had kind of slipped his mind and he had went there to check because she had said that that was where she could have been going in the letter. But one thing that he didn't admit to doing or having on him was Helen Bailey's phone. So why is it that her phone connected even though we know that she was never there? And ultimately, this is the moment where the police know that the only man that can give them the answers to their questions is Ian. So where's Ian? Ian's in Spain. And officers that worked on the case have spoke about this being the straw that broke the camel's back, being the moment that they realised something weird is going on here. Josh, how would you have felt if you were a police officer, if you were investigating this case? This woman's disappeared, you've got a grieving husband, and he doesn't seem to be grieving that much. He's gone on a holiday that they had booked, the two of them. Do you find it weird?
I find it incredibly suspicious, Joey, and I think you've done him a disservice here where you've just said he was a grieving husband. I don't think he grieved for any amount of time at all. And if I was the police officers involved in this case, I would have got him into the police station and got him interrogated far sooner than they actually ended up doing. Because at this point, after his supposed holiday, they knew that there was maybe not enough evidence, but there was certainly a reason to have a conversation with him.
And that meant that on July the 11th, after Ian returns from a couple of weeks of sunning it up in Spain, this happens.
Arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Helen Bailey.
You're joking.
And of disposing her body in a manner which would likely to instruct the coroner and the theft of money of Helen Bailey.
I guess so.
Alright, shall I sit down?
bloody hell, why? What's happened? You found her.
We can't discuss it at the moment. We'll talk to you when we get to the police station. All right?
Where is she? I have to say, I don't think Ian is a very good actor.
No, rubbish.
He's not, because that feigning of a little faint at that point where he sort of sits down and needs to have a moment to recover himself, quite see-through, to be honest. Didn't believe it.
Even just the reaction to when they say arresting you on suspicion of the murder. Oh, you're joking.
Yeah. So
you know what I mean?
He's not going to win a BAFTA anytime soon.
No. And while Ian is actually took into custody having questions put to him, the police know they're kind of in a race against time. They know they need to find something, and therefore they start a deep, thorough search on the house. And when they're doing so, they actually begin speaking to a neighbour of Helen and Ian's. And that neighbour actually says to them that, by the way, I'm not sure whether you've checked it or not, but if their house is anything like ours, they're going to have a massive cesspit underneath their garage. The second that the police hear of this cesspit, bearing in mind that they've had Ian trying to tell them not to go near the garage, they've asked Ian as to where anything could be hidden in that house, any secret compartments, anything they don't know about, and they're not informed of that cesspit. And therefore the police know that the first thing they need to do is go and check that cesspit. And that's when on July the 15th, the police find the remains of Helen Bailey alongside her pet dog Boris in the cesspit. Which means after months of going back and forth, questioning and investigating, they pull Ian Stewart out of questioning and rearrest him for the murder.
So obviously you've seen the footage of him getting arrested. Basically what he's told to then do is put some clothes on, gets taken to the police station, and he's interrogated for more information from the police at that point. And the police got what they needed, even though after 5 hours of talking to Ian, he gave absolutely nothing. He no commented every single question, even though the police were going into great detail to find anything that he would actually say, and he wouldn't. He kept silent. And so that meant that he went to trial, and the police had to draw up all of the evidence in their own right because he confessed to absolutely nothing, and he pled not guilty. And so the trial started on the 10th of January 2017 in St Albans Crown Court, and it lasted up to 7 weeks. And in that trial, the prosecution argued that Ian's primary motive was financial, as he stood to inherit Helen Bailey's fortune, estimated at the time at around £4 million. That included also all of her properties and the life insurance policy that we talked about early on. Now, the police had significant evidence at this time. They had run a toxicology report that revealed traces of a medication that is called Zopiclone, and that is a sleeping medication that was actually prescribed in the first instance to Ian, and they found that evidence within Helen's hair. And so prevalent was this medication that she'd actually been given it for a series of months, even though she had never knowingly taken this.
You know, we spoke about the Google searches where she said, like, why am I feeling so tired and stuff like that. From someone that's taken Zopiclone, right? I've had Zopiclone loads of times, that substance that she was obviously being given without her knowledge, right? I find it pretty hard to imagine you being on it and not knowing you're on it, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
It very much does make you very, very sluggish, sleepy, things like that. I can feel the impact if I had taken it. So the thought of this woman having no idea that that's in her system is something that actually for me is really, really scary.
Yeah, 100%. And it wasn't just that. There was obviously evidence of the disposal of the bodies. They had to go through that traumatic scene. They had to look through crime scene photography as well. So you can imagine that's being presented during the trial, and the jury saw all of that as well. Obviously, they also went into great detail about the links and the evidence around the financial thefts. We have to call them thefts at this point. That's what exactly they were. Not only was Ian taking that money out and changed it very soon after the moment in which she actually disappeared, which is a huge red flag, circumstantial evidence, if nothing else, but also all of the other policies, the will changes and things like that, and him being fully aware of what those changes actually were. And it wasn't just that either. There was a huge digital footprint that the police actually started piecing together about Stewart's movements, and also the fact that he had Helen's phone and that she was nowhere to be seen in that holiday property that they had owned. And there were various other circumstantial pieces of evidence as well. Not just Ian's strange behaviour, the fact that he struggled to even remember her eye colour or her date of birth, which again is super strange, but there was also CCTV of him disposing of various items at the local tip on the day of the murder, including what police believed to have been a blood-stained duvet that he had basically immediately disposed of. Now, you might be thinking that Ian potentially would have taken this with a bit more grace at this point, being the fact that he had a lot of evidence against him, but the defence actually put up quite what they thought was a strong case, and I'll let you decide whether you think this was a strong case or not. Basically, Ian concocted a bit of a story that he was actually on the end of a kidnapping attempt. He had somewhat been able to fight these men off, but two men managed to come to his house and actually kidnap Helen. These men actually, for some reason, named themselves as Nick and Joe. And it did just happen that Nick was a friend of his and Joe was his neighbour, and the descriptions that he gave of them matched those people, which was a bit of a strange thing. He apparently said that they had asked him for a ransom of £500,000, and that is why he had concocted some of the stories that he had said. He had asserted that he was not able to tell the police of this by the kidnappers on threat of death, and basically that they would target Helen and her sons if they did. Now, the prosecution ripped this absolutely completely apart. They found Nick and found Joe, and they found them absolutely nothing to do with the crime in any way, and the prosecution basically dismissed this as completely ludicrous and absurd. And the judge very much thought the same thing, because on the 22nd of February 2017, after less than a day of deliberation, the jury found Ian Stewart guilty of murder, fraud, and preventing a lawful burial, as well as perverting the course of justice. And on the 23rd of February 2007, Ian Stewart was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years, which means at this sort of time, he would have been in prison for at least his early 90s. So it was a significant piece of jail time handed down by the judge. And now you might be thinking this is where our story ends. Ian is now in prison, serving his time, and they've gathered all the evidence they can around Helen's passing. And so that's pretty much it. But the police did do a bit of press after the trial, and they had said that they were going to be looking into another unexplained death. And that unexplained death was the passing of Diane, Ian's first wife. And they re-looked into this evidence. Now, I don't know if you know this, mate, but this was quite interesting. Diane actually donated her brain and heart to medical science as part of her own wishes before she had died. And that meant that her organs were still on file. Yep. They still had them in their possession, which means they could actually run some tests on them. And so that's exactly what they did. They looked at her brain and they studied it in more detail, far more detail than they probably should have done at the time. And they deemed that basically there were some red blood cells in the brain that had died. And there was a gap between about 35 minutes between the point in which the brain cells had died and the time in which she actually passed away. Now, there's only one logical explanation for this, and it's usually asphyxiation. Yep. And it's certainly not dying of epilepsy, which is much more often a very sudden passing and has completely different symptoms to this.
And she was a sufferer of epilepsy, wasn't she?
She was. And this is what the original findings actually said. They said that she'd passed away because she had had an epileptic fit. Now, there was various things that don't quite add up about that. There's various symptoms that you would see. Obviously, if someone has an epileptic fit, they tend to hit the ground pretty hard because they have no control of their motor system at the time. There was no instances of any bruising or any kind, any cuts or obtrusions on Diane's body. So that was the first thing that was slightly strange.
I know quite a few people with epilepsy. Do you know how often their epilepsy actually seems to affect their day-to-day life?
Go on.
Quite often. Quite often. Do you know when the last recorded epileptic fit that Diane had before the one that apparently killed her was?
I don't know, go on.
It was 17 years prior.
Yeah. So
17 years.
Completely out of the blue.
Now, again, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying, the people that I know, some of them being family members and whatnot, that do have epilepsy, they don't go 17 years without suffering from it.
And also, if you are going to have a fit, there are other signs in which you have had this experience. There's often sort of saliva produced. There's also blood that's produced from the mouth often. There's often indications that you've bit your own tongue as well. So there's various things that you can look at. And none of this was the case. Ian had actually said to the paramedics at the time, there was no saliva or blood because I'd wiped her mouth with something, but they'd never been able to find the piece of clothing or, you know, a rag with any saliva or blood from Diane at the time. So
just
again,
quickly, so he wasn't able to turn her onto her side in the recovery position,
Nope.
but was able to wipe saliva from her mouth.
Exactly that. So again, it sort of points to the fact of the police potentially should have done a better job at the time to actually find out what happened to Diane. But now they had enough evidence to know this guy was a very bad man, and the fact that it might be a bit more suspicious than that. So they really do go into more detail on that, and this is where we say that there was some scientific evidence. So not only did they have all of the evidence that we've just detailed about the medical element of the case, they also then started really looking into the finances. And again, they found it a bit strange, the speed in which the money was claimed and that sort of thing. And so basically the police really did have a very good case to suspect that Ian might have been guilty of another murder. So it meant that they were actually able to take him to trial. Now, what is crazy is they have a piece of recording. They have a video piece of footage of when they take Ian from the prison and actually take him down to the police station to let him know that he's been charged. And this is what he said.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of your late wife, Diane
You're joking.
Stewart, on Friday.
You're digging
Friday the 25th of June,
Well, I'm
say anything,
What
maybe give
rubbish?
me evidence.
Have you got nothing better to do than make
We
things
can
up?
discuss this at Thorpewood Police Station.
Yeah, so again, the famous acting of Ian is on full show there. He seems like he can't believe it. And he's also questioning the integrity of police officers, the fact that they probably shouldn't be looking into him when, let's be honest, they're out there to try and catch murderers. So I think they're probably doing their jobs just fine. Thank you very much, Ian.
I think that Ian Stewart is one of the scariest killers that we've looked into on this channel. And I think that would probably raise a few eyebrows when I first say that, because obviously we've looked into men that have done horrible things, you know, men that have harmed children, men that have gone back to take out the families of people that they have harmed and things like that. So it sounds like I'm really over exaggerating this here, but that's honestly what I believe, because we've done cases, let's say, for example, like that of Raumo, right? There's a lot of cases that we've done, and I find that the perpetrators in these cases are often people that might put on somewhat of an act at times when they feel it benefits them, when they feel that it aids them in what they want to do. But for the most part, they're people that do embrace their actual self, which is, you know, that sort of horrible side that has these evil thoughts. Ian Stewart is very, very different to these people, and that's what makes me even more concerned when we look at a killer like this. What you're looking at is a man that not only has committed the worst act possible to his first wife when he killed her, he's actually gained enough confidence to not only do it from a potentially opportunistic standpoint, to, in my opinion, actually target a vulnerable woman. And if it wasn't Helen Bailey that he met in that grieving group on Facebook, I think it probably would have been another wealthy woman that he would have met.
Yeah, this is the thing. I don't really hear from a lot of other videos that I've watched on this case or podcasts around this case, or even doing the research of it, to actually go into the level of premeditation that Ian would have gone on here. I think he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he was willing to deal with years of feigning love and affection if it meant that he would ultimately get what he wanted.
Well, not just that, mate. Dumbing himself down. Also, playing the idiot. We mentioned the fact that Helen had rewritten her will because she was scared that Ian couldn't look after himself, right? Ian can very much look after himself, mate.
He can.
Ian's a man that despite the fact that he might have let on that, you know, he's a bit of a scruff and a bit of an idiot and potentially needs a little bit of looking after. Well, he had it up here to know to go and try and push through that sale of Helen's house, didn't he? He had it up here to know to increase that standing order of Helen's, or to go on the holiday that Helen was on, to make sure that the police didn't go anywhere near where the body was. This man was very conniving. He not only lied to the police, he not only lied to the public, but you know what the worst thing is about it?
Go on.
He lied to his two sons. He killed their mum, and then he let them develop another relationship with another woman who did what, Josh? Treated them as if they were her sons, and he killed her. The man is a horrible, calculated piece of shit. And what he does is he manages to get himself into these situations by playing the victim, by playing the one who life didn't look favourably upon, and, you know, this is what my life has come to and whatever. He played that victim in order to get in the hearts of women that were way better people than himself.
100%. And the good news is that he will be serving life in prison for the rest of his natural life, because he was convicted of murder of Diane, and the judge sentenced him to a whole life order. Very rare actually to get whole life orders in the UK these days. And so for the fact that he actually did get this is one that I have to say I am glad that the Crown Prosecution Service actually managed to convey that sentence upon him.
Very, very glad that they were able to make sure that this man never sees the light of day. One thing that I do want to do off the back of covering this case is thank you guys, because this has been one that our members have been suggesting to us for a good couple of months now, to be honest with you. And it's one that we always knew that we were going to get round to. But again, this is why I'm so grateful that we have the membership feature to our channel. Ultimately, when we do get these cases suggested to us, pretty much every single time, once I go down the rabbit hole and start researching them, I go, God, our members, they've got good taste. They know what makes a good case here. So yeah, I've got to thank whoever it was that suggested this one to us. I think it's a great story.
That. And if you want to become a member yourself, you can do so very easy. There is a link in the description below. Just click that and you can join. It's only $5 a month, less than the price of a cup of coffee.
And if you liked this video, I would recommend you go and watch the podcast that me and Josh did on the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. That is linked below. Thank you so much for making it to the end of another video. Please smash a like on the video if you want to see more from us, and we will see you all in the next one.